Hey, Seattle hockey fans, happy Friday. It's a Firebirds Friday, and we are going to have some Firebirds news, as well as we're going to take you back to my conversation with Steve, where Steve Mayer, of course, who is the chief content officer at the NHL. If you missed that show on Wednesday, check that out for the first part of my conversation with Steve. He's going to give us a few storylines that if he could mock it up for a behind the scenes documentary like we saw in Welcome to the NHL, what would he draft up for us? And then finally, we're going to take you over to Alison Lukan and her conversation with Locked On Flyers about coaching and why I think this might be a storyline to follow. All that and more coming up on this episode of Locked On Kraken.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are the Seattle Kraken.
Hey, what do you say, Seattle hockey fans? Happy Friday. Thank you so much, as always, for making Locked On Kraken your first listen of the day. And in case you missed it, I did a almost exactly 9-minute special yesterday on Ryan Donato, who we officially re-signed. I did one of our nows, that's over on social media, but here is the skinny. We get Ryan Donato back. It's a 1-year deal, $1.2 million. That's less than what we signed Morgan Geekie for, but he is back. I shared on the bonus episode some of the quotes that he had over in the Seattle Times in particular, saying essentially that, he did inquire with other teams for a little bit. He did kind of, raise an eyebrow or so when I heard that Ron Francis didn't want to go into arbitration with him. But here's what Ron Francis said in the official release up on the Seattle Kraken website. Ryan elevated his game last season, and we're happy to have him return to the Kraken. He completed a career year and will hopefully eclipse that in 2022-23. So we here at Locked On Kraken are definitely excited to have Donnie Boy back. So what else? What else is Kraken, if you will, in Seattle hockey news? Well, I want to talk a little bit. I know it's Firebirds Friday, but let's also talk about the ECHL. And it was announced that the Seattle Kraken have partnered with the Mavericks of Kansas City and have a new ECHL affiliate. This is going to be a multi-year deal. I had mentioned, if you recall, that the Calgary Flames, they have a new AHL affiliate now. The Kansas City Mavericks, who had been the ECHL affiliate with Calgary, now they are our affiliate. So this is a multi-year agreement. So we don't have too many updates just yet here. But what I love is that this ECHL means that when I'm in Tulsa and when the Kansas City Mavericks are in Tulsa, we can maybe get you some updates there. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. But as I mentioned, today's Firebirds Friday. We don't have a ton of news coming out of Coachella Valley. Of course, we are very excited. I took you through the entire schedule as we know it. Calgary is one of the first teams that we're going to play, and it's going to be in the Pacific Northwest. But do you follow the Coachella Valley Firebirds on social media? I think you should, because they've been giving us a little bit of a tease here. Look at these, and all I see is Phoenix, as in the mythical creature, the mythical bird of Phoenix. But we have the Coachella Valley Firebird, perhaps mascot, and these little snippets. Coachella Valley Firebird mascot, just kind of taking in the sights of the valley. We never get a full picture, as you can see. And blessed to the people or person who is in this costume, as most of us in the United States have been experiencing a heat wave. Um, but I think that's really cool. So we're getting, look at this. We're getting little snippets and little teases. Look at this photography. Amazing. So we don't know. Look, framing up the shot. We don't know exactly what the mascot is fully going to look like. Colors are on point. It's going to be a phoenix or a firebird of some sort. But so stay on the lookout for that. Again, a little bit milder on the Firebird Fridays as opposed to when we had Jessica Campbell on, as opposed to when we went through the full schedule. But don't worry, it's still a jam-packed Friday episode. I can't wait to get into all of it as my schedule is coming together. I do read the YouTube comments for those who are watching on YouTube. As a channel, we actually are getting more views on YouTube than we are in traditional audio. Speaking of traditional audio, apologies to our audio listeners. I realized that I guess it was Wednesday's show. It never posted. There's a weird thing sometimes when you upload. Anyway, I don't need to get into all the technicalities. My apologies, but that's now available, as well as the Donato bonus episode is available on audio. But while we're talking about it, make sure you subscribe to Locked On Kraken. That way you'll never miss any of our uploads. And of course, make sure you subscribe on YouTube, where you can we have a special playlist dedicated to our Firebirds Fridays. Anyway, I keep playing around with it. We're going to go with Firebirds Friday because it's Friday, so we're talking about the Firebirds. Anyway, check out our curated lists, including, of course, one dedicated to Ryan Donato, as I've mentioned before, and other players as well. But the Donato now has a special bonus episode that I posted yesterday. Okay, so we're going to get back to some welcome to the NHL talk. I hope by now you've seen the documentary. We're going to bring back Steve Mayer. Again, for those who maybe didn't hear the first part of this, that's on Wednesday's show, the last part of Wednesday's show. But go take a listen. And this is about the documentary, the behind the scenes documentary, learning a little bit more about Steve and his upbringing. And we're going to come into it as he's talking about what does it take to get permission and how long does it take to get access to, they followed multiple players, including players that went in the second and third round of the 2022 NHL draft. So how do you coordinate that? What does it look like? Were there any access problems? So we're going to pick up from there. So that's what's coming up next on Locked on Kraken. Before we head over to Steve, though, I want to tell you about Built Bar and the new cookie dough chunk puff. Now, this is a chewy texture, real cookie dough, real cookie dough chunks. And of course, just like every other Built Bar, it's covered in 100% real chocolate. The cookie dough chunk puffs are only 160 calories, and they have a whopping 15 grams of protein in them. Like all Built Bars, the cookie dough chunk puff, as I mentioned, is 100% covered in chocolate, and it is just a really amazing way to stay on track, to make sure you're not hangry, and if you're like me, also make sure that you have a snack, that you're getting your protein without all of that sugar, but still with a great taste. So you're gonna love the new cookie dough chunk puffs, but don't miss out. I've missed out on a few pretty boss flavors because I did not head over to Built Bar and then use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off my order. Don't make that mistake. I love having Built Bars, especially for someone that travels as much as I do. And yes, for those asking in the comments, yes, I do travel to the Pacific Northwest. Of course, I travel to Seattle. Can we... Anyway, we'll talk about that a little bit more probably next week regarding when I'm coming back to Seattle. Anyway, for now, use built.com, promo code LOCKS15. That will get you 15% off your next order. Happy snacking. All right, we are back, Seattle hockey fans. We are back, NHL fans, and we are back with the Chief Content Officer of the National Hockey League, Steve Mayer, our continued conversation where he is talking about the latest documentary, a behind-the-scenes look at the 2022 draft. That's called Welcome to the NHL. Let's kick it over to my conversation with Steve. What was the most difficult part of kind of coordinating, as you mentioned, those top prospects that you wanted to feature in something like this?
So, this is one of those shows where it's not that difficult because, you have these young players, and their families are very open to sort of you coming into their world and documenting that big moment. And, we find that these new players, these young players, they're all very accepting of the fact that, hey, we're going to have cameras around. We're going to come to your hotel. We're going to watch you on the bus. We're going to walk into the arena with you. We're going to go up on stage with you. They don't mind it. And, for us, it's really just figuring out who are we going to cover? What are the players we're going to watch? And then where are the other cameras going to be? What tables, what teams, what, other areas are we going to focus on a show like this? And then it plays out like the drama of a draft is just, you just don't know who teams are going to pick. And you try to get insight. You try to find out. You try to talk to them beforehand. But, when they walk up to that microphone, you're really hearing their pick like everybody else for the first time. And that's where the drama is. And that's what makes these shows and the draft interesting. I must admit, it's a little different, our draft, as opposed to, say, football and basketball, where, after the draft, you're guaranteed to see almost, all the first rounders at least go to training camp and compete for jobs. In the NHL, maybe 2 to 5 players will play the next season in the NHL. So it's a little different in terms of, what the result means. I think in your case, in Seattle's case, you're going to have a guy who's going to play next season. But other teams made picks that, they're going to wait around for that player to whether he finishes college, junior hockey, or whatever. They'll eventually join the league, but, might not be there immediately.
Yeah. I mean, again, so much drama in this draft alone. But as you mentioned, just drafts are prime for drama, and being able to, again, highlight that drama and the excitement and maybe even sometimes the disappointment and shock and all of that stuff. But we're glad that you captured this one in Welcome to the NHL. I mean, there's been so many things in your tenure with the National Hockey League that you've brought in where you can definitely see that entertainment background, which has been a lot of fun as someone who, as we talked about offline, is new to the NHL in particular. So I've certainly enjoyed it. But we'll leave you with this, Steve, because you've been very gracious with your time. We're gonna keep it as a homer question. So we are gonna ask about Shane Wright and the Seattle Kraken. If you could draw up some storylines for us that you'd like to capture in something similar to Welcome to the NHL, what would you follow and who would you mic up?
Well, listen, I just think that your team and we have the experience of working on with your team the expansion draft, and it goes through the first year, and now like some of the players coming back and establishing themselves at their first year. You've got some new players coming in next year that seem really exciting. I just think right now the fans in Seattle should be psyched that things are heading in a really cool direction. And, when you look at adding a Shane Wright, who, again, many people thought was going to be the number 1 pick, and he goes to number 4, and, look at who was picked before him and look at the teams that were before him. Now, in my opinion, like storyline, and you see it a little in the show, when Montreal and New Jersey and Arizona come to town, Shane Wright is going to be ready to play.
Oh, yeah.
Those are kind of things. Listen, you hear that throughout all athletes' careers. They need a little something to get them motivated. And I think, being passed by those three teams will be motivation and will create quite a storyline coming into the season. But, listen, you've got a lot of great young players and you got an amazing front office. And I have the utmost respect for Ron Francis. I think people should be really excited about the prospects of all that could be happening in Seattle in the next few years.
I love it. So, Steve, what you're telling us is we're not done with revenge games. After an entire season of revenge games, we've got more.
Yeah, why not? Listen, it's fun. And rivalry is awesome in sports. And, yeah, you got a couple of built-in ones now based on what just happened.
I love it. I mean, I think we already had a budding rivalry with the Devils after Hughes went down in one of our early games. So I think they'll be up for the task. But Steve Mayer, thank you so much for your time and joining us on Locked on Kraken.
Erica, thank you so much, and it was a real pleasure.
Indeed. All right, that's all she wrote. Thanks again. I'm sorry we had some technical issues, but I enjoyed talking, and I don't know, I might need to get you back on for that full story of how you got into entertainment, sports and entertainment.
Anytime.
Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, as always, Seattle hockey fans, for listening in to Locked on Kraken. We're going to close out the show actually taking you over to Locked on Flyers. That's because our very own Alison Lukan joined Locked on Flyers to talk about their new coaching situation. And the rumor mill has been really buzzing around about Dave Hakstol. And I think John Tortorella is like the anti-Dave Hakstol. And you'll hear that Torts, he sometimes even likes being a little controversial. He'll say things and he'll take the heat off of his players. Whereas Dave Hakstol, I think, is very much, and I've talked about this a lot, he's a lot more traditional. If he doesn't want to talk about something, he's going to tell you, absolutely, that stays between me and the players. I think he has found in his own way how to defend his players and stand up for his guys while also challenging them. But you're not going to hear him throw anyone under the bus. You're not going to hear him name names. I was using air quotes for those listening on audio. And that seems to be the oppo of Torts. Is one better than the other? Honestly, I think it depends on the situation. And I am not gung-ho about getting rid of Dave Hakstol, at least not yet. That being said, I think it's free game to ask a lot of questions of Dave Hakstol coming into this next season in particular. And I don't know that I've seen enough for him to be able to answer some of the glaring questions that I have about the Seattle Kraken coaching. Anyway, so that's why I wanted to take you over to this. And next week, I want to talk about, there was this list that went around about coaches that are most likely to get fired. And yeah, Dave Hakstol, top two on that list. So let's talk about it. Anyway, let me take you over to the amazing Alison Lukan. And of course, Russ and Rachel, good friends of the pod. Rachel in particular has been on the show before, but that's how we're going to close out this Friday. Before we close out though, my wellness tip for you is be kind. Be kind to one another. There's another piece of this ECHL news that I want to get into. It's not very pleasant and kind of falls into the category of what we're seeing with Hockey Canada. So I'm going to hold on to that. I'm not ignoring it. But again, it's just, let's be kind. That being said, you can be kind and still hold people to account. And so let's make sure we're finding that balance. Yeah. All right, let's head over to this clip from Locked on Flyers. Alison Lukan talking about coaching in the NHL through the eyes of John Tortorella. Hold fast, stay true, have a great weekend, and I'll see you next week.
All right. We are absolutely thrilled to welcome back to the show Alison Lukan, who is now an on-air analyst for the Seattle Kraken. Of course, she used to cover the Columbus Blue Jackets. And so that was one of the reasons why we wanted to bring on the show to talk all things John Tortorella. So I think like the big picture question about him is, how does he make teams more than the sum of their parts?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, listen, I think Torts does get a bad rap on the big broad brushstroke scale. I'm not going to say he's the best coach ever. I'm not going to say he's perfect. But one of the things to understand about John Tortorella is he is most fascinated in terms of, in his words, he calls it coaching the mind. So a lot of what he had to do with Columbus, which is obviously a little bit of a different state than Philly is right now, was building a winning culture. And that specifically meant making people who were supposed to be leaders on his team leaders, and then also making them believe that they could win. Columbus at the time was a very tepid team. They would kind of ease into things and they didn't have that confidence. So it's a lot of that building a team mentality. We're all in this together, boys. We're in this against all these obstacles. That's the infamous speech in Tampa Bay, right? Do you know, no one's even talking about you. That's how much no one thinks you can do anything. That's why we're going to go out and do this. So it's a lot of mental coaching. And the other thing I think he does, and I am fascinated, I have to say, to watch Scott Hartnell cover John Tortorella now after playing for him. But one of the things, and Scott Hartnell has talked about this, and other players have too who've played for him, I think the other reason Tortorella gets results is that players have varying degrees of satisfaction with this in the moment. But anything John Tortorella says about a player publicly, he's already said to the player. And that doesn't happen in every organization in any league of hockey. And so I think that gains him some credibility. And he also, I will say, one of the keys to him is when he goes on his rants, did something bad happen for the team? Because now we're all focused on his rant and not what his team did wrong. And there's a layer of protectiveness in his theatrics that I consider to be actually quite intentional. So I think those are some of the keys to how he gets guys to buy in and why they end up starting to really be able to be free to be more of what maybe people thought they could be.